and new concerns about China's reach and suppressing unfavorable media coverage. The Epoch Times and NTD, two American media companies known for exposing human rights abuses by the Chinese Communist Party, were recently denied access to key Asia Summit events.
That's right. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the incident, which happened at the recent ASEAN and APEC summits.
An Epoch Times reporter traveling with the White House encountered repeated roadblocks in accessing key press events in Asia, the latest in a pattern of interference linked to communist authorities in Beijing. Epoch Times is NTD's sister media. Both companies were ultimately denied entry to the ASEAN and APEC summits. They were the only outlets denied access despite having received pre-approved press credentials. This occurred after a series of twists and turns involving communications discrepancies, unlikely tech glitches, failed promises of press credentials, sudden reversal of statements, and passing the buck. Epoch Times editor-in-chief Jasper Fokkert said in a statement, "The Chinese Communist Party is an enemy to freedom of the press." He called it deeply concerning that the regime could influence international bodies like the United Nations and ASEAN to block access for what is now America's fourth largest newspaper. Headquartered in New York, the Epoch Times has long been a target of the Chinese regime, from threats and intimidation of advertisers to physical obstruction of reporters. In 2000, its first journalists in China were arrested, with several sentenced to a decade in prison. More recently, UN officials barred its reporters from entry in September. The campaign has intensified. Hackers impersonating Epoch Times staff have threatened U.S. agencies. The paper has received bomb threats, and an envelope containing white powder arrived at its headquarters in October. Travis Gilmore, White House correspondent for the Epoch Times, arrived in Malaysia 2 days before President Trump joined the ASEAN summit. Gilmore had pre-approved media credentials. However, when embassy and White House staff went to retrieve the credentials for media personnel, ASEAN officials informed them that Gilmore's profile needed updating. Repeatedly, Gilmore said he found himself in the same cycle, being told to come back and pick up the press pass later, only to find nothing when he returned. On October 26th, the ASEAN staff told Gilmore he got a pass approval, but the credentials never materialized. Mariotsu and Chen Lei, White House correspondent and videographer for NTD, faced a similar situation when they arrived at their hotel in South Korea ahead of the APEC summit. Inside the hotel, a reserved media table at the press filing center bore the NTD logo, but APEC staff members restricted their access and stated they didn't have the pair's credentials. The media liaison team blamed a mix-up for what happened and told Otsu they had found her media pass, only to walk back the statement within minutes, saying the earlier message was sent in error. Neither APEC nor ASEAN returned the Epoch Times request for comment on the article about the incidents. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.